Hello, welcome to whatever this is called, where we honor dads the only way we know how, with nostalgia and mild judgment. I'm Scott Taylor, and this here is Mr. Stephen Garcia. How you doing, Stephen?
I'm doing well, and Scott, don't tell mom, okay? All right. How are you, Scott?
You know, Steve, I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed. There's a difference.
There is a difference.
So we've gathered here today to celebrate with Father's Day on the horizon. We're cracking open the VHS vault and honoring the dads who raised us, or at least raised our expectations through our television sets and the big screen. From blue collar legends and science experiment disasters to time traveling protectors and adoptive heroes, we're diving into the most iconic, underrated, and unforgettable fathers of the 1980s TV and film. Some made us laugh, some made us cry, and a few definitely should have lost custody, but they all left a mark. So let's talk about the ones who truly earned that world's greatest dad mug, or at least didn't shrink their kids twice. Steve, the 80s is definitely your wheelhouse. What vibes do you think of when you think of 80s dads?
That's when I suggested this topic, I kind of felt bad after a while because I realized that your this is more your wheelhouse, but we'll get there eventually. And
Yeah,
these dads, it was a weird time on the sitcom scene. And if you're talking sitcoms, movies, it was kind of a little different. But sitcoms, it was kind of the 70s, the 60s and 70s were kind of the age of the nuclear family, and you had all the brothers and sisters all on one roof. In the 80s, it was kind of dying out. So not dying out, but it was just a kind of a slow decline because it went into the 90s a little bit. But overall, it was fun. There's a few good ones that I really loved. I was a sitcom. I watched a lot of sitcoms, so movie wise, there's a lot to choose from. So, I have a couple on here too. It's kind of a mixed bag here. How about you? When did you start watching? When did TV sitcoms kind of become your thing?
I remember when big for me was when it started to be TGIF,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
And you'd have like
Yeah.
Full House and that sort of stuff on Full
Yeah.
House. Technically would qualify, but it was a little later in the 80s, so I didn't go with that. I tried to stay true to the 80s. I still have a lot of 80s sitcom and TV knowledge. Elf was my jam. I don't have Willie. I don't have Willie on my list here. It was a little too neurotic for my top five. But yeah, there's a lot of different types of movie and TV data, especially in the 80s. It definitely was kind of
Yeah.
its own little genre of identity there.
Yeah. Yeah. It was kind of weird too because I was reading up on a lot of these stuff, a lot of these TV shows and in the industry in particular. They were saying I was reading a lot how in the 70s it was a little more loosey, hippie, kind of vibe. And as we went into the 80s with Reagan and all that, kind of got a little more conservative in terms of what they showed on TV and stuff like that. And so it was a unique switch because I think on one of my family ties, they show that kind of dynamic, that mixture, and it was really
Mhm.
cool. It came out really good. They did it really well in the 80s. So, yeah.
Yeah, you've got a lot of mixed families. You got a lot of different types of families,
Yeah.
different types of situations, which just, sitcoms led themselves to that, right? You wanted some sort of goofy premise to draw people in, and then you went with the emotion and the heart from there.
Right. And it just showed you too back then it wasn't as divisive as it is today, but that's another can of worms. But yeah, it was a cool time to be a kid in the 80s and having your TV shows and having I don't know, families. I come from a really kind of I want to say maybe dysfunctional family. So when I watched TV, for me, it was a little more security. It was like, oh, okay, that's kind of family should be. Now, of course, that I was a kid thinking that. Now I wouldn't think I dare to think that at all. But I mean, as a kid, you don't have any frame of reference, and except for yours. And so when yours is a little messy and dysfunctional, you kind of look for a little, functional family ties and things like that. So
And a
yeah,
little escapism too, because you're like, well, my family has these like real world problems. These funny families on TV. Oh, they can, oh, the car didn't start again. Like it's funny when it happens to them, but when it happens to
right.
your family, you're like, oh, I'm walking to school the next couple weeks.
Yeah, yeah, and it's crazy the hijinks that these families got into, like turning your house into a hotel for the weekend. So
Hmm.
just crazy shenanigans.
So do you have a good mix of like TV and movie? Because I've got a
Yeah.
couple movie and a couple TV.
Yeah, I got an honorable mention that's a movie, so I got 6, so it's half and half. I tried to do that because there's one on here that's I kind of the TV show I didn't re I was it was kind of getting into my later years, and so I was, middle school, and so I was kinda going out a lot then, but I remember him from a previous show, and so I kinda threw it in here, but, it's neither here nor there.
I kept myself for as a stickler to the rules that I had to be a dad, but beyond that, I could set my own criteria. I could set my own policies for which ones I chose here and why. I
Okay,
tried to look
cool.
at like a couple different things, like caring level, were they involved, their fun
Okay.
level, and then their competency.
Wow,
A little
okay.
bit there,
Alright,
but there's
alright.
some that you're like no, 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 yes in those categories. So we can dive right in. You want to go with what you'd say would be your number five?
Number 5, okay.
No disassemble.
What happened?
No disassemble.
Okay, so, what I was just talking about, Frank Lambert from Step by Step was portrayed by Patrick Duffy. Now, I did like this TV show. I think I was ooh, I don't see. When did it start? It started in 91. Oh, wait, 91. That's way out of the criteria.
What?
Sorry. Anyways,
People, turn this podcast off right now. Just put it off. We're sorry. Just hit, the next button. Go on to Conan O'Brien or something, because we're just a mess
man,
over here.
I did not even pay attention to that. Anyways, I picked that only because I loved him in Dallas.
Mhm.
And to see him do such a contrast of characters, I thought, oh, it was pretty cool. And yeah, that was a big. I got to edit all this shit out. No, not really. But anyways, yeah, that's my number 5.
At least it's
I
number
have,
5,
yeah, yeah,
At
yeah,
least you were like, my number 1.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, fix it, Scott. Get us back on
Well
track.
well, no, I mean, it's still fine. I mean, that's another mixed family there, right? It was a bunch of
Right.
step siblings, which you go back to, Brady Bunch even,
Yeah,
right? You go
exactly.
back to '70s.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
was the biggest one in history, is the Brady Bunch of a
yeah.
mixed family kind of coming together.
And it had Suzanne Summers, in there
Mhm,
from, Three's Company, and so you had a lot of, nostalgia there, legacy
mhm.
there in that sitcom, and then you had the kids that were wacky and got into all sorts of hijinks, but,
And they
yeah,
paired the
I
kids off kinda too, which is similar to Brady Bunch, right? They're like
right,
the oldest daughter and son were both about the same age, and then the middle
right,
kid.
yeah. So you had those pairings when they had their own little storylines, you could kind of mix and match there. But yeah, it was Patrick Duffy was a big guy from Dallas, and I was a big Dallas fan in the '80s, and Who Shot JR, all that kind of thing. And looking back on this now, they don't. I don't know. I don't watch a lot of TV now, but it's like yeah, I kind of miss those like Dynasty, Knots Landing. Those are huge in the '80s, and so anyway, so yeah, to see him in a sitcom it was kind of fun. So yeah, that's my number 5. What about yours? What's your number 5 there, Scotty?
So for my number 5, he came from a war-torn future to protect the mother of his child, and he died
Ah!
before meeting his son, and somehow still shaped a rebellion. We're talking Kyle Reese, Terminator 1984, played by Michael Bain?
Bean.
Bean.
Yeah.
So, is he around for his life? No. But he is a father, right? Not in that movie, but, he creates John Connor.
And if you don't send Kyle, you could never be man, girl could go crazy thinking about this.
It's, he's back. He comes back, leaves everything he knows, which, of course, is just like a robot apocalypse. So it's like, I'll go anywhere. Just send me somewhere else. That's fine. But he's sent back in time and
Yeah.
has to do something to save the world, and
Yeah.
literally do something to save the world, if you know what I mean.
Wink wink.
So, yeah. So as far as, how can you beat a dad, beyond that? Solid number 5, saving the world, coming back, doing his dad duty. And yeah, he's not there to play catch, but you know, he
What
was a dad.
how do you get out of that time loop though? Like so you send your son back so you can exist. And then you're just in this loop, right? I mean, so they kill the Terminator, so it's but then with subsequent sequels, you see that well, that didn't even work. They're
Mhm.
sending more. They're sending the T-1000. They're sending the T-50, whatever. It's just a horrible loop. That's I
There's a
would hate to be that
mhm.
guy.
There's a few schools of thought on this. There's uh, all the different, you know, Back to the Future type of timeline. You've got
Yeah,
this. It had to start with one timeline where they're just the first timeline. There is no John Connor, and it was
right.
somebody else.
Yeah.
And then he comes back, and there's just somewhere in the multiverse theory. You and I are both sitting here in ninja outfits, right? Like there's one of every scenario. So
With pizzas.
with
I
pizzas,
just had to throw that in.
with pizzas. And so we've trained a bunch of Ninja Turtles of sort, and now we're doing a podcast about it.
I love it.
So what do you
Wouldn't change it for the world.
what do you got for number 4?
Number 4. Wow. Number 4, what did I do? Okay, that's it. Jack Butler from Mr. Mom, played by Michael Keaton. I don't know if I think you've seen it. You said you've
Hmm.
seen it, right? Yeah.
Yep.
This guy has 2 kids. He's an engineer at an auto factory in Detroit. This is like early '80s when, the layoffs come. He gets laid off, technically furloughed, for those out there that's confused. And now has to take over the house duties while the mom kind of goes out and back into the corporate world, and she starts earning the bread. She's the breadwinner. Meanwhile, he's learning a new side of himself and learning how to take care of his kids, learning how to run a household, learning how to be a participant in his community, of all these things. And I think he does it pretty well. He does it with a great sense of humor. He even gets caught up in soap operas, to the dismay of his kids. But even his kids get caught up in the soap opera. So that is my number 4, or yeah, 4 is Jack Butler, Mr. Mom, Michael Keaton.
Solid
Bam.
choice.
Yes. Great guy. And he's fun. He's always got a quip. He's sharp, he's witty, so yeah, that's my
And
favorite.
there's like 4 of them, right? Oh wait, that's
Oh, no, that's
Multiplicity.
that's a different one. Yeah, that's it.
That's
That's
joking.
later on.
Little joke there, people.
What's
Well,
your number 4?
so y- ignoring what you've heard about this person in the news, I am going with Cliff Huxtable. Going as as a
It's either
character.
it was either him or Kevin Spacey.
Yeah, I'm going with Cliff Huxtable as a character. Yeah, a lot of my chat with my talking with ChatGPT on this was like character only, character only. We're just talking character here.
Yeah.
You can't. It's hard to beat a '80s dad that isn't Cliff Huxtable. He was very involved in his kids' lives. He everything that you learned on there that you were learning through them interacting with their kids, you weren't being lectured, you were being taught.
Right.
Right. So you were being shown and then, explained things, and there were repercussions, but you weren't necessarily yelled at and told you were stupid or anything like that. It was always very present and a one on one type conversation. So you had all sorts of stuff.
And he was a pediatric doctor, right? Is that
Yep.
what it was?
No,
Yeah,
he
okay.
was, he was a, was he an OBGYN?
Oh, yeah, yeah,
I
because
think
he
he was.
delivered
Yeah.
babies.
Yeah. He
Yeah,
delivered babies.
yeah.
Yep. Oh, but he was home. His practice was like out of his house most of the time, right? He had like an office
Was it?
downstairs. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, every once in a while, they show him
Okay,
in his office
alright,
downstairs,
alright.
and he was in a brownstone, so
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
guessing it was
yeah.
like that basement apartment type thing. He was just there all the time for his kids. He was goofy but on point,
Yeah,
and if
yeah,
it hadn't been, for all the real life stuff, he might have been
yeah.
up higher at number 1.
That was such a big fall too. I mean, he was big in the late '60s, in the '70s, and he influenced a whole lot of people. I mean, I think to see him fall that far, that's damn, dude. People can't. Jeez. Anyways, yeah, I don't feel bad for him. I'm just saying that's just a big fall.
My favorite it's weird to say, my favorite Bill story, Cosby, because you're like, "Don't no, not those stories," is the story that Norm Macdonald would tell about him.
Uh,
Have you heard that one?
uh,
I'll paraphrase it here. Go
okay.
see Norm tell it because it's on YouTube and it's beautiful. But he saw Bill Cosby at one point and he was like, "Oh, my dad is such a big fan. I remember listening, watching with my dad, listening to your records." And he was like, "Well, give me his number and where are you from? Vancouver?" He's like, "Yeah." He's like, I'll set your dad up with tickets and backstage passes and we'll hang out." And Norm's like, "Okay," and he writes down a phone number, and Norm's dad was dead, and he just didn't know how to tell Bill Cosby that his dad was dead, and so he gives him his phone number, and then when the show's about to happen, like, months later, he gets a call, and it's like, yeah, this is Bill Cosby on the line for you?"
Uh,
And Bill Cosby's like, I've tried to call the number, and it must be wrong." So go find the full Norm, it's a great story about Bill Cosby.
oh my goodness, my goodness. That does sound like a typical Norm story. That's
Mhm.
awesome. Shit.
So that was 4. Let's see, what do you got in the 3 spot?
Well, the 3 spot, I'm going movie again. He's a little, he can be accused of being a peeping Tom. He has kids that, skateboard and what I don't know. Anyways, that was a horrible, intro. George McFly, played by Crispin Glover, Back to the Future. That in and of itself, I mean, the guy, he can't stand confrontation. He's not good at it. He's been bullied his whole life. But then, his kid goes back in time and rearranges some stuff. And he becomes the head of the household, and you have no doubt in this guy's ability to handle his kids or handle any kind of confrontation. So that's George McFly, Crispin Glover, Back to the Future. That's my number 3. How about yours?
So I went movie as well for my number 3. We're going back to 1984. He didn't ask to be anyone's father figure, but when a troubled teen showed up with 2 fists and 0 direction, he taught him more than just how to fight. I'm going Mr. Miyagi.
Oh,
And
yes.
technically, he was not Daniel's father, but he was a father.
Father figure.
He was
Yes.
father figure to Daniel, but he was a father biologically. He had a child that he lost with his wife.
Yes.
So he is a father. Canonically, it's there. I'm allowing it.
Yeah, I'm allowing it too, man. That's an awesome one.
He didn't have to get into Daniel, like, burst himself into his life, right? He didn't have to get involved. He could have just walked back into his apartment and be like, and not interacted. But he didn't. He didn't have to
Yeah.
be there, but he showed up.
Yeah.
And it showed in their bonds. He kept it a lot buried emotionally. So if he had a flaw as a father figure, there was that. But in the second one and stuff, he does let his guard down more.
Yeah.
He shows that he didn't guide out of obligation, but empathy
Yeah.
for
That's a good
Daniel.
thing.
And he didn't need to step up. He chose to against again when he had to.
Yeah. That's a good one because that was a tearjerker when I remember my mom and my grandma went and I went and saw it in the movie theater at the Cottingtown Cinemas. And, it was just touching, especially the scene when he gets drunk and he starts reliving the moment he lost his wife and kid. And yeah, that's a great pick, man. I was thinking about that, but then I was like, I got my list and I was thinking about putting him in the honorable mention, but I got my honorable mention here. So yeah. Good
Yeah.
pick. Good pick. I enjoy it.
All right. Up the number 2 spot.
Number 2. Now we're getting into TV land here. These kind of came. This one came out. I was a big fan of Taxi. The later years of Taxi. I only saw like maybe the last 2 seasons or last season or something. But this guy comes out with a new sitcom. He wants to get out of Brooklyn. Ex ball player, has a bum shoulder, had to retire. Wants to get his kid out of Brooklyn and the city to kind of a better place for his daughter. And that's why we landed at number 2, Tony Maselli from Who's the Boss, played by Tony Danza. I like this show. I was a big fan of this show. I was a big fan of Alyssa Milano when I was a kid. She was my age,
Mhm.
or maybe a year older. I can't remember. And was just loved the show. Like Mona, the got Mona, got Tony, I got Samantha. I don't have the mother. Anyways, Mona, she was in Soap, that old sitcom, and it was just about a guy who's a housekeeper to this corporate woman who drives to New York every day, and he's out in I think Connecticut. I think that's where the house is, and he cooks, he cleans, he watches over her kid. Loved it. That was mine. Did you ever see that show?
Mhm. Yep, I was a
Yeah.
fan. I was a
Yeah. Okay.
fan.
Cool.
Hold
Cool.
Me Closer, Tony Danza. That is a solid
Tony
choice.
Danza. Yes, that was. He did a couple reality shows in the I think the early in the aughts in the early 2000s. I think he did one where he was in Philly as a some sort of history teacher or math teacher or something like that, or English teacher maybe. And then he did one where he was a boxer or tried to be a boxer. So he's still around. He still looks good too, looks good for his age. So what do you got for number 2?
So number 2, I went TV as well. We're talking 1983 to 89. He gave up gridiron glory for school lunches and bedtime routines and proved that being a good dad doesn't mean being perfect, just present. I'm going with George Papadopoulos from Webster. So the man never wanted, I mean, maybe he wanted to be a dad when he was younger, but he didn't ask to be a father, right?
Right.
Webster is his godson, and
Yeah.
Webster's parents die, I think, in a car crash, and he takes him in. He's like, "This is what else am I expected to do?" He and his wife have their own jobs. He's like an NFL, what do you call it, correspondent,
Yeah,
right?
commentator, something like that,
Commentator.
yeah.
So with him being your dad, you're gonna get kick-ass tickets, right? Your seats are gonna be pretty solid there. You're gonna be able to get to any.
Well, on the field probably, depending on which team is playing, yeah.
Yeah, but so he opens up his house to him, and this is why I didn't have Mr. Drummond on my list. I went with George because George wasn't filthy rich. He didn't
Right.
have the help
Yeah.
come into his apartment, so they took Webster in as he was their own, and he sometimes tried too hard to parent right. It came off as stiff or
Yeah.
overly
Yeah.
stern when the show began, but he adjusted quickly to the parenting of it, and he had that kind of gentle charm.
That was, that's interesting to your point, of him being a little rigid. He is, I think that's the kind of process that every stepfather, I guess, or new father kind of goes through. I myself did not have a good experience with that, but I've seen a lot of good experiences of that with like friends or whatever. And it was good to kind of see that again when I was talking about TV being kind of a little escapism to me when I was watching this, and Different Strokes too. Maybe that's why subconsciously is because I just didn't have that experience, and it was always such a like, wait, your step parents are nice, that kind of thing. So when I would see like Webster, Different Strokes, it would be like, wow, that's so cool. Like their parents are so cool.
Mhm.
So that's a good one. That's a good one.
All right, we doing honorable mentions before number one. Who,
Yeah,
who do you got? You
yeah.
got one. You got a
Well,
couple.
I got one. Well, I mean, yeah, I'll stick with one. Clark Griswold from Vacation.
Chaotic good, right?
Yes, I mean, it's this thing of he's so hapless and so unlucky and so does not have any kind of self-awareness and y- more like my real stepfather, except he wasn't funny. And so, yeah, this movie was one of my favorite movies growing up. I watched this all the time. My intro was actually going to be like the freak out in Arizona when they just drop off the dead his dead mother or his dead wow someone's dead mother.
Yeah, it was Ant. Was it an Ant?
It was yeah, it was an ant. So it was I can't remember. Old man brain. We got to do an episode on the things we just can't remember. I swear. Yeah, but that was one of my favorite movies, and it was Clueless, Hapless, all the lesses. So yeah, it was just a great movie. That was one of my favorites.
The reason that I left him off was because all of his decisions were kind of about him. Like he never listened to his family
Right,
and his
right,
things.
right.
It was just just in his gut, what he felt was right in the direction to do and the thing to do. He just never put their thoughts into play. It was just
Anything.
him.
Dude, the whole time they're like, "Well, why don't we just not do that?" "No, hey,
Nope.
okay."
Nope. We got to do it. We got to do it.
Yeah.
And as someone, that struggles with that in my mind, like, yes, once I have a plan, it's like, it's hard for me to deviate from that. I get
Yeah.
angry. I get stressed.
Yeah.
I get that. I understand that side of Clark Griswold.
So, yeah, it was one of my favorites, and yeah, you're right, he was kinda bullheaded too, and he just did not yeah, there was what is that thing of or else, who else wants to see the world's largest ball of mud just only 4 short hours away or something, things like that, and yeah, so what do we got? What's your honorable mention?
So my honorable mention is kind of a group. It's when I was putting the list together, I was thinking about these people, but I didn't want to give credit to the dads where they weren't great when they started, and then there was a story arc, and they became great because of that arc. So
Okay,
I've got a
alright.
couple of those people that are in that
I'm interested.
category. So the three I listed: Wayne Zelinsky, Honey I Shrunk the Kids. right? Like he's an absent father there. He's more focused on his machines and science and, distant from his kids. And then he shrinks them and he's like, "Oh crap, my wife's going to kill me if I don't make these kids larger again." So he does that and then he learns it's more important, for your family than science. So he's got that arc there and becomes a good dad after. Lewis Creed, Pet Cemetery.
Yes.
I mean, the heart is in the right place, right? And he's a good dad to begin with, but then he does the opposite. He kind of trails off there. He becomes selfish and raises a
Well, it's
zombie.
it's like with all Stephen King stuff. It's that battle between good and evil, and it's so interesting in that, especially because I've read the book. I haven't seen the recent reiteration of this, but it's, in anything that he writes, it's always if it's good, then it's gonna go bad. If it's bad, then it could get even worse or even good. But it's yeah, to see that in Pet Cemetery, gosh.
Yeah, and
Reading the
it's
book is just as scary too. Oh,
it's got to be
love it.
a hard choice to be put in that position, and
Yes.
be like, I can bring them back, but I
Yeah.
know there's something's gonna be off about them.
Yeah.
And my number three there in that grouping is, of course, Anakin Skywalker.
I was gonna put Darth Vader as an honorable mention.
Mhm. You start off, he's a good guy, and then, even before they've been born, he's slayed all the younglings, right? So they're
Jesus.
already off to a bad start there. And then he has a redemption arc,
Yeah.
slight redemption arc. I mean, he does one thing. He
Yeah,
throws the emperor
exactly.
over the
Right.
edge. That's it. That's one thing. That does not make a redemption arc. That's one item. An arc, that's, more of a triangle, right? It's not an arc. So those are my 3 for ones that are honorable mentions, but only because they kinda did something or they're partly there, but never crossed the finish line.
Those are great. Those are good. I mean, I think I was thinking about Lewis and Anakin or Darth Vader, whatever.
Mhm.
I had those on my mind on the peripheral, and I just didn't know where to place them, and so I had my honorable mention already. So I was like, because I went this morning, I kind of went through and refreshed and looked at other possibilities. Yeah, those two came out. Good one. I like those.
So who raised to the top? Who was the cream of the crop?
Cream of the crop. This man was a hippie, fell in love with a fellow hippie. They both went to school at Berkeley, ended up raising 3 kids, or 4 eventually, but initially it was 3 kids, moved to Columbus, Ohio, and he started running the local PBS station there. My man, Stephen Keaton from Family Ties. He was played by Michael Gross, and he was he was the Cliff Huxtable before Cliff Huxtable, I think. And he kind of where I think the Cosby Show had one specific kind of audience. It was originally this show that kind of put, let's see, Family Ties walked so the Cosby Show could run,
Mhm.
kind of thing. And I was glued to the TV every Thursday night. First, it was at 8:30, then it went to 8, and then it was at 9. I think 9 was the latest it was ever on. I could be wrong about that, but it was a staple. I had to watch it every week. It was just the sets were kind of warm and fuzzy, kind of comfortable, kind of this homely feel to it. And the storylines were great. You had Alex P. Keaton as the kind of conservative to the family, kind of liberal kind of thing, push and pull kind of dynamic there. And they did it great. I mean, it was yeah, it just never showed one side was better than the other. It was just always that kind of in the middle family feeling. It was great. I loved it. I watched it every week until I got into middle school, and then I would watch it maybe once in a while. But for those first 4 or 5 seasons, man, it was my jam.
And that was a flip too, because usually you'd have the story would be, the tight collared parents, and then the kids
Right.
would be the loose ones.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And here it was, and Alex just made it funny. It was kind of the practical, I guess, side of things. And, sometimes he was right, but, it was just that kind of dynamic that just made it really cool and funny. And it made you kind of not tolerant, but just like, okay, we're all in this together. Let's just, love each other kind of thing. So, yeah, that was my favorite. How about yours? What's your number one?
So my number 1 is definitely about the family-centric aspect. It debuted in '88, but ran well into the '90s, but technically still an '80s dad.
Gotcha.
He's working class glue that holds his loud, sarcastic, lovable family together, even if he sometimes hides in the garage. We're talking Dan Connor. We're talking Roseanne, played by John Goodman.
That's a good one.
You know,
Holy sh
he's total teddy bear when it counts. He loves his wife and his kids deeply. He's not afraid to do the work. He's equal partner in parenting, self-deprecating, always game for a good laugh. And he's imperfect but dependable, right? He
Right,
juggles
yeah.
work, he juggles home, real life stress. He's your dad when he's tired and trying anyway. And that's kind of the dad that they showed was not one that was always happy or always on top of things. It was no, he had his flaws. But when it came to his family, even Jackie, his sister-in-law, and so there's one where
Do you
she
remember that one?
yeah, that's what I was going into here
Yeah.
because she's being abused and he goes over and he just beats the guy up. And it's you can tell that he loves his family and his heart is always in the right place for his family. And you
Yeah.
can see that in his kids too, because his kids also share that feeling. They share that family centric, it's us against them. Like, yeah, I can make fun of them, but you can't make fun of them
Right,
type
right,
of
right.
mentality that a family has.
Yeah, that's a good one, man. I remember loving that sitcom too until probably like the early 90s, maybe 90, 91. Again, because I was just in middle school, high school, didn't watch a lot of TV in this. But um yeah, great sitcom. Really, like I love the working class aspect of it. The house was never really spotless, but it
Mhm.
was kind of cluttered a little bit, which is like what my house was. So there's a lot of relatability on that, and I love that sitcom. So yeah,
Yeah,
good choice,
even
dude.
with the, when they not rebooted it, but kind of re-envisioned it and brought it back
Yeah,
for a bit with Roseanne and then changed to the Connors, like it was solid the entire run. The entire run
yeah,
of it is just great. You can go into like, when they won the lottery and stuff like that, and that's kind of up in the air, but it's always there that it's about family first.
yeah, yeah. And I think that's why I liked Family Ties as well. That was the main message was family. And I think a lot of these sitcoms that was, some of them didn't come across as obvious or they didn't do it as well maybe, but I think a lot of these were always centered around the family, especially in the 80s, it was the husband and wife. I think in the 80s is where you kinda got a little more progressive in terms of what the roles were, because I think in Family Ties, Stephen Keaton was the manager at a PBS station, but then Elise was an architect or an engineer, I think an architect, and, if I remember correctly, and she was an independent contractor, then I think a storyline was she went to work for a corporation to do that, but it was always about the family and centered around family, which I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, that was the vibe. That was the vibe in
Yeah,
the 80s, and to have those two on top, it shows that it was about family at his heart.
yeah.
That none of the dads were perfect, but they were there, and from gruff to the goofy, you know, time traveling to the quietly wise. That's our list of our favorite 1980s dads from TV and big screen. So what do you think of our choices? Did we miss any? Were we way off? Leave us a comment anywhere. Our socials are below. We're happy to hear and would love to hear who your ultimate 80s dad is, whether they wore flannel, a gi, or futuristic body armor. We salute the fathers of the VHS generation. Have a great Father's Day, everybody out there, and we'll catch you next time for whatever this is called.